Hello and welcome to Millennium News Hour. I am Tanziba Nawreen. In today's bulletin, we will present top and trending news from across the nation and the world. Let's begin with the headlines of the day. Biden on Memorial Day lauds generations of fallen US troops who dared all and gave all. Biden says final US debt ceiling deal ready for Congress vote. Ten dead, others hospitalized after being pulled from ocean off New Jersey beach. Nun whose body shows little decay since 2019 death draws hundreds to rural Missouri. Stock market today. Markets mostly higher after Biden-McCarthy deal on US debt. World leaders congratulate Turkey's Erdogan after historic win. US Senator Lindsey Graham on Russia wanted list after war remarks. Russia strikes Kiev in daylight after hitting Ukraine's capital with series of nighttime barrages. Wildfire forces thousands of people to evacuate in eastern Canada. Japan PM son dismissed as aide over official residence party. South America's presidents gather in Brazil for first regional summit in 9 years. Bola Tinubu sworn in as Nigeria's president amid hopes skepticism. Nepal honors Sherpa guides climbers to mark 70th anniversary of Mount Everest conquest. India's northeast remains on edge after ethnic clashes as Home Minister plans visit. New mom Elena Svitolina beat seeded player at French Open in first slam match in 16 months. Joseph Newgarden wins his first Indy 500, gives Roger Penske his 19th victory. And Horse Racing Authority calls for emergency summit with Churchill Downs in wake of 12 deaths. You were listening to headlines, now news in detail. President Joe Biden lauded the sacrifice of generations of US troops who dared all and gave all, fighting for their country, and called on Americans to ensure that their sacrifice was not in vain, as he marked Memorial Day with the traditional wreath-laying ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery. Biden was joined by First Lady Jill Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, and Harris' husband Douglas Emhoff for the 155th National Memorial Day observance. He had a moment of contemplation in front of the wreath, which was adorned with flowers and a red, white, and blue bow, and then bowed his head in prayer. We must never forget the price that was paid to protect our democracy, Biden said later in an address at the Memorial Amphitheater. We must never forget the lives these flags, flowers, and marble markers represent. Every year we remember, he said, and every year it never gets easier. Monday's federal holiday honoring America's fallen service members came a day after Biden and Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy reached final agreement on a deal that would raise America's debt limit and that now awaits approval by Congress. President Joe Biden has finalized an agreement with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy to raise the debt ceiling over 2 years until January 1, 2025, saying the deal is ready to move to Congress for a vote. The Democratic President and Republican Speaker spoke on Sunday evening as negotiators rushed to draft and post the bill's text to enable lawmakers to review compromises that are unlikely to be popular with progressive Democrats or hard-right Republicans. The two men hope they can secure sufficient votes before the June 5 deadline to avert a first-ever default by the federal government. A vote in the House is expected on Wednesday. Good news, Biden declared on Sunday evening at the White House. The agreement prevents the worst possible crisis, a default for the first time in our nation's history, he said, takes the threat of a catastrophic default off the table. The deal follows weeks of heated negotiations between Biden and Republicans to avoid a default that could cause financial markets to freeze up and lead to an international financial crisis. Analysts say millions of jobs would vanish, borrowing and unemployment rates would jump, and a stock market plunge could erase trillions of dollars in household wealth. A default would all but shatter the 24 trillion market for treasury debt. Biden said he expected McCarthy to have the necessary votes for the deal to pass. A 15-year-old boy died and several other victims were taken to hospitals after 6 people were pulled from the ocean at an unguarded New Jersey beach over the weekend, authorities said. Officials said it happened at about 4:30 p.m. Sunday at Sandy Hook in the Gateway National Recreation Area. Daphne Yoon, a spokesperson for the National Park Service, said the 6 were swimming at Beach B, which has no lifeguards. Sandy Hook lifeguards responded from other nearby beaches. First responders from nearby Sea Bright and Highlands joined them in pulling the 6 victims from the water. The boy and 2 other victims were taken Monmouth Medical Center in Long Branch, where he was pronounced dead. 2 victims were taken to Jersey Shore University Medical Center in Neptune Township. One person declined medical treatment, Yoon said. There was no immediate word on the condition of the surviving victims. Yoon said Beach B is the first beach encountered by visitors who entered the park, although signs indicate that there is no lifeguard on duty. Beaches C, D, and G had lifeguards on duty during the Memorial Day weekend, she said. The Asbury Park Press reports that at least 28 people drowned last year in natural waters in New Jersey, which include rivers, lakes, and the ocean, according to preliminary data from the State Department of Health. Hundreds of people flocked to a small town in Missouri this week and asked to see a black nun whose body has barely decomposed since 2019. Some say it's a sign of holiness in Catholicism, while others say the lack of decomposition may not be as rare as people think. Sister Wilhelmina Lancaster was exhumed in April, according to a statement from the Benedictines of Mary, Queen of Apostles, in Gower, Missouri. The nuns had been preparing for the addition of a St. Joseph shrine, and that involved the reinterment of the remains of our beloved foundress, Sister Wilhelmina, the statement said. When they exhumed Lancaster, they were told to expect only bones, since she had been buried in a simple wooden coffin without any embalming 4 years ago. Instead, they discovered an intact body and a perfectly preserved religious habit, the statement said. The nuns hadn't meant to publicize the discovery, but someone posted a private email publicly, and the news began to spread like wildfire. Volunteers and local law enforcement have helped to manage the crowds in the town of roughly 1,800 people, as people have visited from all over the country to see and touch Lancaster's body. Now it's time for global updates. World shares were mostly higher Monday after President Joe Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy reached a final agreement on a deal to raise the U.S. national debt ceiling, though the measure requires approval by Congress. Paris, Frankfurt, Tokyo, Sydney, and Shanghai advanced while Hong Kong fell. Markets in London and Seoul were closed for a holiday, and US markets was closed Monday for Memorial Day. The agreement on the US debt eased what had been a potentially huge threat to markets worldwide. Biden and McCarthy worked over the weekend to try to ensure enough support in Congress to pass the measure before a June 5 deadline and avert disruptive federal default. Markets are so far reacting cautiously, buoyed but cautious. Clifford Bennett, chief economist at ACY Securities, said in a commentary. This agreement merely rolls the issue to potentially more politically friendly times post the presidential election in 2 years. Nothing is certain in this regard, and it is possible resolution will be even more difficult then than it has been on this occasion, Bennett said. Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin were among world leaders congratulating Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan after he won Sunday's historic runoff election to extend his two-decade rule. US President Biden said he hoped to work with Erdogan on shared global challenges. I look forward to continuing to work together as NATO allies on bilateral issues and shared global challenges, Biden tweeted, making no mention of recent tensions in the bilateral relationship. Russia's President Putin, who has collaborated closely with Erdogan on key international issues despite some disagreements, told Turkey's leader that his win was the logical result of your dedicated work. Ursula von der Leyen, President of the Commission of the European Union, which Erdogan aspires for Turkey to join, said the bloc wanted to strengthen ties with the country. Jens Stoltenberg, Secretary General of the NATO military alliance, of which Turkey is a member, also sent congratulations. Congratulations, President, on your re-election. I look forward to continuing our work together and preparing for the NATO summit in July, he tweeted. UN Chief Antonio Guterres congratulated Erdogan on his re-election, the Secretary General's spokesman Stéphane Dujarric said in a statement Sunday. French leader Emmanuel Macron said the two nations had immense challenges to work on together. Writing on Twitter, Macron said this included the return of peace to Europe. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky welcomed the win for Erdogan, who since Russia's invasion of Ukraine has positioned himself as a mediator in the conflict. Russia has put United States Senator Lindsey Graham on a wanted list, according to Russian media reports citing the Interior Ministry's database. Ukraine's presidential office on Friday released an edited video of a meeting between Graham and Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, which first showed the senator saying the Russians are dying, and then that US support was the best money we have ever spent. After Russia criticized the comments, Ukraine released a full video of the interaction, showing that the two remarks were not linked. On Sunday, Russia's investigative committee said it was opening a criminal investigation into Graham's comments, without specifying what crime he was accused of. Russia has previously sanctioned dozens of US officials and politicians but has rarely sought the arrest of senior office holders. Graham disputed Russia's criticism of his support for Ukraine by saying he had praised the spirit of Ukrainians in resisting Russia's invasion with US assistance. Explosions rattled Kiev during daylight Monday as Russian ballistic missiles took aim at the Ukrainian capital, hours after a more common nighttime barrage of the city by drones and cruise missiles. Russian forces fired 11 ballistic and cruise missiles at Kiev at about 11:30 a.m., according to Ukraine's Chief of Staff Valery Zaluzny. All of them were shot down, he said, and puffs of white smoke could be seen in the blue sky over the city from street level. Debris from the intercepted missiles fell in Kiev's central and northern districts during the morning, landing in the middle of traffic on a city road and also starting a fire on the roof of a building, the Kiev military administration said. At least one civilian was reported hurt. The blast unnerved some locals, already under restraint after being awakened by the night attack. The capital of Canada's eastern province of Nova Scotia has declared a state of emergency as an out-of-control wildfire raging near Halifax forced thousands of residents to evacuate and prompted the closure of schools. The Halifax Regional Municipality has set up temporary accommodation for people fleeing the fire and reminded residents early on Monday that the evacuation orders are mandatory. The wildfire, fed by strong winds and tinder dry woods, has damaged dozens of homes and hampered rescue services, authorities said. Dave Meldrum, deputy chief of Halifax Fire, told reporters on Monday that there had been no reports of missing people or injuries, but structures had suffered damage or were destroyed. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida said today he will remove his son from the position of his secretary due to inappropriate behavior at the official residence. The decision comes after a magazine reported last week that Shotaro Kishida had invited relatives to the official residence for a party last year, with photos of some pretending to hold a press conference and one lying down on red-carpeted stairs. Kishida had reprimanded his 32-year-old son, but criticism erupted from opposition parties, which called for his removal. Kishida had already come under fire because of his son, who used official cars while traveling in Europe to buy souvenirs for ministers. South America's leaders will gather in Brazil's capital on Tuesday as part of President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva's attempt to reinvigorate regional integration efforts that have previously floundered amid the continent's political swings and polarization. Analysts say Lula senses an opportunity for integration because of the political affinities of the region's current governments and appears to want to test leaders' willingness to cooperate through a revived union of South American nations. Lula said at a news conference Monday that the leaders should discuss cooperation in energy and crime fighting and suggested he might consider floating the idea of a regional currency to challenge the US dollar. But he said nothing would be decided during the meeting. The main idea is that we need to form a bloc to work together, Lula said. First established 15 years ago in Brazil's capital during the second presidential term of Lula, a former trade unionist, the regional bloc sought to integrate the 12 South American nations culturally, socially, politically, and economically. Bola Tinubu became Nigeria's president on Monday during a period of unprecedented challenges for Africa's most populous country, leaving some citizens hopeful for a better life and others skeptical that his government would perform better than the one he succeeded. Thousands of Nigerians and several heads of government attended the swearing-in ceremony for the 71-year-old Tinubu in the country's capital, Abuja. He succeeds President Muhammadu Buhari to lead a country that by 2050 is forecast to become the third most populous nation in the world, tied with the United States after India and China. Tinubu, the former governor of Lagos, which is Nigeria's economic hub, has promised to build on Buhari's efforts to deliver democratic dividends to citizens in a country where deadly security crises, widespread poverty, and hunger have left many frustrated and angry. And with his election still being contested in court by opposition parties and among many young Nigerians, Tinubu has also pledged to reunite the country. Nepal's government honored record-holding climbers Monday during celebrations of the first ascent of Mount Everest 70 years ago. The celebrations come amid a growing concern about temperatures rising, glaciers and snow melting, and weather being harsh and unpredictable on the world's tallest mountain. Hundreds of people from the mountaineering community, Sherpa guides, and officials attended a rally in Kathmandu to mark the anniversary. Participants waved celebratory banners and walked in the center of Kathmandu to tunes played by military bands. Among those honored were Sherpa guides Kami Rita, who climbed Everest twice this season for a record 28 times overall, and Sanu Sherpa, who has climbed all of the world's 14 highest peaks twice. Haribu Dhamagar, who became the first double above-the-knee amputee to climb Everest, was also honored by the country's tourism minister Sushila Sirpali Thakuri. Shootings and arson continued Monday in India's northeastern state of Manipur, where clashes between security forces and tribal insurgents the previous day killed 5 people, media reports said. The state, which borders Myanmar, has been roiled by violence for weeks after members of mostly Christian tribal groups clashed with the Hindu majority over its demands for special economic benefits. More than 75 people have been killed in the fighting, the state's worst ethnic clashes in decades. Hundreds have been injured and more than 35,000 have been displaced. Authorities said Indian Home Minister Amit Shah was expected to arrive in the state capital, Imphal, on Monday evening to review the security situation and help restore peace in the state, where the internet has been shut off to stop rumors from spreading and a curfew is in place. The violence prompted the federal government to rush thousands of paramilitary and army troops to the state, and many of the recent deaths were caused by the security forces. The state's chief minister N. Biren Singh said Sunday that 40 Kuki insurgents have been killed by government troops. It was not clear whether the figure was part of the overall death toll. Now it's time for business news. Today's New York stock close price is 15,078.69. The NYSE composite is increased by 102.72 points or 0.69%. Tokyo stock close price is 31,233.54. The Nikkei 225 index is increased by 317.23 points or 1.03%. Shanghai stock close price is 3,221.45. The Shanghai index is increased by 8.94 points or 0.28%. Hong Kong stock close price is 18,551.11. The Hang Seng index is decreased by 195.81 points or 1.04%. Bombay stock close price is 62,846.38. The Sensex index is increased by 344.69 points or 0.55%. Let's have a look on today's sports stories. So much has changed for Elina Svitolina, who played and won her first Grand Slam match in nearly 1.5 years on Monday at the French Open, eliminating 2022 semi-finalist Martina Trevisan 6-2, 6-2. For one thing, she is now a mother. Svitolina and her husband, French tennis player Gael Monfils, welcomed their daughter Sky in October. For another, Svitolina is now ranked 192nd, nowhere near the career high of number 3 she first reached in 2017, back in the days when she was regularly reaching the second weeks of major tournaments, including a pair of semi-final runs. Away from the courts, her home country of Ukraine was invaded by Russia last year, and the war continues. The Indianapolis 500 is the one race Joseph Newgarden desperately wanted to win. It's basically the only race that matters to his boss. Coming up empty for 11 consecutive years had become personal for the two-time IndyCar champion. Newgarden finally broke through Sunday, though winning the Indy 500 to extend team owner Roger Penske's record to 19 victories, and the first since he bought Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Newgarden did it with an audacious pass of defending race winner Marcus Ericsson during a frantic, controversial 2.5-mile sprint to the finish. Horse Racing's Oversight Authority will hold an emergency summit Tuesday with Churchill Downs, Kentucky's Racing Commission, and HISA veterinary teams to review information and analysis in the wake of 12 horse fatalities in the past month at the home of the Kentucky Derby. The Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Authority announced Monday that it will also send track superintendent Dennis Moore for a second independent analysis of the training and surfaces. HISA Equine Safety and Welfare Director Jennifer Durenberger will provide additional veterinary expertise and oversight of horses at Churchill Downs. The review will begin Wednesday, a HISA release on Monday stated. CEO Lisa Lazarus and Track Safety Director Anne McGovern will visit the track to receive analysis results and suggest follow-up. 7 horses died from training or racing injuries at Churchill Downs leading up to the 149th Kentucky Derby on May 6, including 2 on the undercard. Gelding Lost in Limbo and Mare Kimberly Dream, both 7-year-olds, were euthanized after sustaining similar leg injuries over the weekend at the track. Let's have a look on today's weather forecast. Before finishing today's news, let's hear out the headlines again. Biden on Memorial Day lauds generations of fallen US troops who dared all and gave all. Biden says final US debt ceiling deal ready for Congress vote. Teen dead, others hospitalized after being pulled from ocean off New Jersey beach. Nun, whose body shows little decay since 2019 death, draws hundreds to rural Missouri. Stock market today. Markets mostly higher after Biden-McCarthy deal on US debt. World leaders congratulate Turkey's Erdogan after historic win. US Senator Lindsey Graham on Russia wanted list after war remarks. Russia strikes Kiev in daylight after hitting Ukraine's capital with series of nighttime barrages. Wildfire forces thousands of people to evacuate in eastern Canada. Japan PM son dismissed as aide over official residence party. South America's presidents gather in Brazil for first regional summit in 9 years. Bola Tinubu sworn in as Nigeria's president amid hopes, skepticism. Nepal honors Sherpa guides climbers to mark 70th anniversary of Mount Everest conquest. India's northeast remains on edge after ethnic clashes as Home Minister plans visit. New mom Elena Svitolina beats seeded player at French Open in first slam match in 16 months. Joseph Newgarden wins his first Indy 500, gives Roger Penske his 19th victory. And Horse Racing Authority calls for emergency summit with Churchill Downs in wake of 12 deaths. That's all in today's news. Keep watching Millennium News 24 for latest update. Millennium TV US and Millennium News 24 network is transmitted and available to be watched free for all ACT TVs such as Sony, Samsung, LG, Roku TV, Amazon TV and Apple TV, and also in all European countries and Australia available with the Sky Network, Worldwide Jago TV, Radiant IPTV, Worldwide Jago Media Network and Horizon Satellite globally. Stay connected with us for all types of informative and entertainment program. Thank you.